Hi, we have been listening to the stories galore about China's involvement, the responsibility of China as far as this pandemic of coronavirus is concerned. And today, when I read the news, the UK is demanding over $300 billion as damages from China. I was really astonished how far it's true that China is responsible. Is China really responsible? Or was it to be a pandemic that was going to cause havoc? And China became the first victim of that. Did China fight against the devil coronavirus heroically? Or was it responsible for this disaster? If we look at it, the whole thing is so confusing. There are more stories, more rumors, more fiction than the fact. And then I remember George Orwell's 1984. And the key word is black and white. Rather, black is white. It's not China that gifted this deadly novel coronavirus to the world. And it's China that has emerged as heroic, deadly, novel world leader fighting the war. It has brought the planet precious little time to fight the virus. If China had not provided these 3 months, the world would not have been prepared. It's not prepared even today. But China gave 3 months notice that pandemic is spreading. And it brought the planet precious time, which the planet did not take. As a matter of fact, I plan to discuss the deadly role of United Nations and the absolutely insipid role of WHO in one of my comments in the next few days. But when I look at the Chinese television, showing endless loop of the Chinese doctors and medical supplies being rushed to the ravaged countries like Iran and Italy, and then receiving warm thanks from them. After having received brickbats from USA and from UK, imagination flounders. On the one side, people are thankful to China that is fighting the war, leading the war, and though it's devastated itself, helping countries like Iran and Italy fight the devil. A believer in the strategy of offense is the best defense, China has employed its formidable propaganda machinery to rewrite history as it happens. Normally, history is rewritten after centuries. In India, the history is being rewritten now, where Hindutva and basic Hindu rules are being deified, exalted, and the Mughal period is being demonized. But here I find that the Chinese propaganda blitz is to claim the leadership role that has been abandoned by America's first president, Donald Trump, who doesn't want to be involved since America has been involved for a long time. So we see history being rewritten and black is being rewritten as white. China's absolute failure to report the first cases of coronavirus, the rumored silencing of the whistleblowers, the death of the doctors who treated, the virtual clampdown on millions of the people, that is being whitewashed by a very formidable, very powerful propaganda machinery to rewrite history. If you remember, the first casualty of coronavirus happened on 23rd of November It came in the newspapers. Casualty was 5 days before that, November 17. 44 days passed, and then China informed United World Health Organization, and UNO that there was an unidentified virus affected. And then even then they say it has been erased. They did not say that it is spreading. The heroic recounting and the heroic rebuttal of China's fight against the devil. And that's what Chinese President Xi described the virus. Began on 23rd January. So 17th November to 23rd January, there was absolutely cone of silence enveloping the whole world. And then on January 23rd, 11 million people lost their freedom. There was a clampdown, and no mention was made about the whistleblowers. And then tens and thousands of the Wuhan residents were practically put in jail. This was a lethal deception and came later on in the explosion of pandemic across the globe. Nobody can excuse the carelessness of United States and other governments, whether it's Italy or Spain or England or France or Germany, that they did prosecute. But then the primary fault was, is, and shall remain with China. It's quite rich for China to claim leadership fighting the disease. And only weeks earlier, it had condemned countries of blocking visitors from visiting China as racist. China clearly wants to deflect focus from its responsibility by the propaganda. And it's not just defensive, it's an attempt to convert adversity into an opportunity. It's an unusual move for a foreign ministry official to blame USA for conspiracy. And I'm not denying again, it's quite possible that USA did plant some virus, might have. There's no proof. But China is saying so. And even the Beijing friendly WHO, which is lavishing all praise on China with bold values and transparency, has called such assertions dangerous. But it has not dampened China's push towards an alternate narrative. China is apparently recovering from pandemic. But then the other pandemic is looming on the horizon. It wants to appear as a responsible world leader to help humanity. It helps to prepare the ground for its role in devastated post-corona world. If you remember in 2008, China stepped forward in the time of depression to the advantage of the economic devastation brought by the Great Recession. And it hopes now to replay the leadership game that it played over. And as a result, China, as a country accounting for 16% of the world GDP, is in position to transform the pandemic fighting success by claiming superiority. And how? By its authoritarian system. While boasting about the success of China, is using international tools to block scrutiny into its actions, scrutiny into its deception, scrutiny into its practically putting millions of the people in household clampdown for 3 months. And 3 months is a long period. And then President Xi takes unusual steps like calling the leaders of the France, Germany, Italy, and even the King of Spain to offer help, and people, especially the Italian leaders, and incidentally, let me tell you, it is the only EU country which has signed One Belt, One Road initiative. Now, all these countries are expressing gratitude. And no, it's not gratitude. They are prostrating themselves before the mighty emperor presidency. It appears as if Kublai Khan has returned back, and the hope, the wish of the Ming dynasty of having the world domination is successful. Complaints have been there from Italy and Turkey about the defective Chinese medical supplies. But China is the rotating chairman of the Security Council and it played its game very well. It stopped the Security Council meeting. It did not permit the Security Council to discuss its deception, its role, and its perfidy to the human race in the Security Council. It blocked all attempts to hold a Security Council meeting to discuss the corona issue. Such a meeting, if it had been held, would have brought the spotlight on the Chinese responsibility for pandemic. And China as a heroic leader and defender of the public health would have been devastated. But then black is white. And China is turning that black into white. George Orwell is being vindicated by this clear whitewash of the deception. But then there's another issue which is coming up, and that is the Thucydides trap. The Chinese-US rivalry has made impossible to fight the demon of coronavirus. They face a common threat, and still they're enemies at each other's throat. They have declared truce in their trade war, in the tariff war, phase one. The deal signed in January when the coronavirus hit is practically of no significance because as they fight a common threat, the war has shifted from trade and tariff to propaganda. It is media being manipulated by and for Chinese which are playing the game. And China is aggressively touting its success in containing the virus. And USA with England now seeks to name and shame Beijing for its origin. There should have been time for a concerted international response. And what we are witnessing, national fightbacks. No sign of a concerted global response. China wants to prove that it is the only savior of the world, and USA and UK are deadly opposed to it. The first telephone talk between President Xi and Donald Trump is after 10 weeks, 10 weeks of the tragedy happening. And the conversation was general. There was no specific concerted action. The G7 meet failed to come up with a customary joint statement because USA insisted on referring to coronavirus as Yuan virus, as a Chinese virus. The G20 meeting held the initiative of Prime Minister Modi did mention the importance of the word trade, but that was in passing. IMF had already said that we are in recession worse than 2008. And let me tell you, we are going to surpass the depression of 30s as well. $5 trillion pledged by G20 countries to spur economic recovery are not going to be sufficient. And as one of the economists, a former IF economist said, the whole thing is long on generalities, short on specifics. USA insisting that this virus originated in Wuhan has stalled all actions. So US is adamant that Russia must not support China. that China must be branded as evil. So now the situation is they are in a catch 22 situation. They are basically in the classical Greek Theodices trap, and coronavirus epidemic has worsened the situation. The geopolitical context and the pandemic is opening the world to unending conflict. So from being partner traders to collaborators to competitors, now they are opposed to each other. US has restricted the export of all the foundational technology, biotechnology, advanced surveillance, 3D printing, artificial intelligence, and robotics. These are the areas banned by USA as far as China is concerned. China says it's going ahead with the 5G to the detriment of US, and 5G is absolutely detrimental to the security of the West. So the Chinese challenge to the US technological supremacy is piracy, and they could impede US innovation because of the level of interconnectiveness between the two countries. So this is a real Theodice's trap. Damned if you do it, damned if you don't do it. There is a lot of decoupling, but that's high. And media is not concentrating on that thing. What we needed was a de-risking strategy by these countries, and even India is failing there. There's as far as the situation is still now, Modi is very successful in uniting India to fight it, but it is not having any strategy for de-risking. And what we need is not a disaster management today. When the people talk to me of the disaster management and the contingency plan and plan A and plan B, I laugh at myself and at those people. What are they talking about? What we need is a de risking strategy, and that would enable us to be independent, not to be dependent either on China or on USA. The COVID crisis will add new industries. The arms industry of USA is going to be finished. Now, this pandemic, we can assume the form of bioterrorism, as has been revealed by Tabligh Jamaat in India. Now, a cooperative approach would have been successful. Now, what's the situation today? USA and Europe are still struggling to meet the twin challenge of virus and keeping their economies afloat. India, same situation. Beijing has controlled epidemic and has gotten its economy going. As a matter of fact, never stopped. The whole thing was that the factories were shifted from Yuan to Shanghai to other parts, even to Botswana. The reports are that the 30 factories were shifted brick by brick to Botswana in this period. And they're producing and manufacturing and selling. So the success is there as far as China is concerned. But the reality is that China, though it has 16% of the GDP, cannot pull the global economic engine. 38% of the Chinese exports are for USA and Europe. And China knows that the economic health of both the regions, USA and Europe, is vital for its well being. And that is going down. Now, USA has pledged $2.5 trillion for stimulus to prevent a social welfare disaster, but not to revive the economy. India has allocated 1.7 trillion package, but that will not address even the social distress resulting from the outbreak. The G20, 5 trillion, well, that's all a promise. Nobody has put in a single penny till now. So the first things first, Addressing the economic challenge of COVID 19 is important. But is that important? No. A new world order is going to emerge. What is important is today not to blame China and not to whitewash China. It is important to face the virus and extinguish the virus, wipe it out. Be it smallpox, be it tuberculosis, be it H1N1, be it Ebola, be it SARS, whatever. We need a concerted international action. Secondly, with a pandemic which has yet to run the full course and whose problem is yet to be revealed, you need full cooperation. At the same time, we have to say for a long time goodbye to globalization, and each nation has to be self dependent. And herein comes the role of the leaders like the thoughts of the leaders like Gandhi's, where each nation was to stand on its own, not on the charity of others, and not bother about it. The old economic system has to be demolished. The macro economy and the micro economy have to be segregated. And it's microeconomy as far as the country is concerned, and the macroeconomy is not to be bothered about. The industries, the economic sector like hospitality, aviation, hotel, tourism. And tourism, if you remember, I talked about it, that tourism is the worst possible thing that could ever happen in the world. It's the disaster career. So those have to go. Then armament industry has to go. And what we need is more robotics, informatics, artificial intelligence, augmented intelligence, and back to nature. Those technologies would need an inward turn to the mankind. And micro industry, micro businesses would have to be flourished. Otherwise, the monoliths and the multinationals had their day. From 1921 to 2020 is a long period. And we need a new economic order. We need a new political order. As a matter of fact, we should be thankful that nature has given us a chance to wipe out these parasitic elements of the old order. Exporters, what do? On the one side, they exploit the workers and then get the subsidies of the governments. And it happens not only in India, it happens in USA, it happens in Canada, it happens in Germany. Don't need them. We need a new economic order which is basically micro industry based, not macro industry based. And as far as the blame game of China is concerned, let's put an end to that. Let's consider the word as it is and the word it want to be a Garden of Eden, not a House of Babel that it was becoming. Think about it.